TV shots of a deep connection.
Sounds.
Get my
My moderates.
Is it recording? Okay. All right, so the time's 6 o'clock and I call the October 8th Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I just want to add to the agenda, salary survey presentation. So it's on there. Under additions. It's on under additions to the agenda. You have to add it.
So we're adding it to the adding to report.
I don't know. I didn't know. I never noticed the additions to the agenda before. Okay. I guess we have to add.
Okay, I'm good.
All right, so we'll start with citizens' comments. Everyone's here for the presentation. Did you have any comments? We don't usually have people in the audience. So. If you want to make comments, you can.
At least know if they're back facing.
So then just the minutes from the last meeting, and we'll do this.
Move to approve.
I just wanted to make a couple of changes,
Oh,
just to the fact that Skip wasn't here and he's on here being in attendance.
who's here in spirit?
And
Move to approve now
yeah, with the changes with
with the changes.
all in favor? Opposed, hearing none, approved. All right, so now we have our salary survey presentation from Randi Frink Consulting, and we have with us on Zoom Randy Frank and Georgianne Lucier, and they're gonna introduce themselves and start for us.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm Randi Frank, Randi Frank Consulting. I have over 40 years of municipal experience as a budget and management analyst and an assistant town manager in Rocky Hill and Cheshire, Connecticut. My consulting firm has been in place for 24 years, handling human resources, classification and compensation studies, and executive searches. We have completed 33 classification and compensation studies for municipalities in the, we've done many in Connecticut. We did Rhode Island, we did Massachusetts, we did Kentucky, we did Virginia. I think those are the states we've done.
Well, we're working with Oklahoma, right?
Oh, now we're doing Oklahoma. Yeah, we got to add Oklahoma. So we've been doing this a while, and Georgianne and I created a classification compensation manual public sector version after we were no longer able to use another system we were using. We took all our years of experience and created that. So it's a copyrighted system that we've used with all of these towns now. And I'll let Georgianne introduce herself.
Thank you. Georgianne Lucier. And I'm in Wallingford, Connecticut, and central part of the state there, although my daughter's out in Canterbury, so I'm very in love with your part of the state, let's put it that way. And as Randi said, I've been with her for, well, I would say over 20 years, and I've done over 20 municipalities. I started my own business about 30 years ago. And I have over 35 years of classification and compensation experience, well over 35. And I've provided the services for both nonprofit, private sector. I started my career in human resources with Aetna, and then I moved to Travelers, and I worked in manufacturing and banking and cemeteries, all types of industry. So I'm going to give a little plug to my husband, who's a retired building official. So I've lived a bit of the municipal life with him. And Randy's husband is a retired public works director. That's us.
The other thing I didn't say was I grew up in Norwich, Connecticut, and I'm an NFA graduate. So I know the area well. My mom's still in Norwich, so I'm in the area many times. So we were asked by Voluntown to conduct a classification and compensation plan after they received our raw data from the town of Sterling's salary survey. So we had sent out a salary survey for the town of Sterling, did their class and comp work. And Voluntown was one of the towns that was comparable. So they, as a result of them answering the questions, they received a copy of the raw data. And that's when they said, can we do this too? So the advantage is they didn't have to do the salary survey and wait for other towns to respond because we had all that data, and Voluntown did not have to pay for that part of the project. So we were able to start the project, and Georgianne is going to do an orientation about the process, which I will share, and talk about, whoops, I went to gotta go to the front page.
Well, that's right. Go up to slideshow and then.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah, from the beginning.
All right, we're ready. So
Okay.
Georgianne's going to tell you about that, and then I'll finish off with some more information.
So thank you. The employees saw this orientation. I went out and on site, met with all of them that were available to come to the session. And again, it's with, Randy Frink Consulting, and there we are. So this system that we develop is really, a couple of objectives, really. It promotes equal pay for equal work. It's very much an objective approach. It assigns compensation ranges, which you will see a copy of the product of that this evening. And of course, if there's any promotional opportunities, it helps identify what different levels of functional responsibilities there might be. So that helps inform people, and certainly aids in recruiting. It's always a much more productive recruiting process if you have a job description that's current. And in terms of the objectives, probably the linchpin of all this are the next slide, are the job descriptions. And, that is based on interviewing people, having them fill out a questionnaire. And we do group positions with similar levels of responsibility together to come up with a classification plan. Next. So the study is not concerned with individuals. We are not concerned about what particular educational credentials someone has. We might ask them just for context, but we're looking at what would be required for this job to be filled by, say, the next person. It's not concerned with their performance at all, nor is it an organizational study in terms of making recommendations of restructuring. We certainly offer opinions and observations, but that is not a key, purpose of the study. And it's certainly not a reduction in force effort. So it's a very objective process of going in, documenting the job descriptions, collecting salary data, making assessments. And around that, I mentioned a questionnaire. So it basically asks people about knowledge, skills, and abilities that would be required, that are required in a position, and the incumbent in the job is our best source of information about that. Their supervisor also reviews their responses and signs off on it. And again, that's done, also followed up with an interview process. Can be done over the phone, can be done in person. And we do draft the job descriptions for review. Once they are finalized, then we're ready to start comparing jobs to salary survey information. And as Randy has mentioned, Voluntown was in the enviable position of already having participated in a recent study, so not having to purchase consulting time from us to go and do that search of pay data. So this salary survey had Basra, Sprague, Chaplin, Preston, yourselves, Ashford, Pomfret, and Brooklyn. And those towns were arrived when we at when we first did the study, just based on, geography, demographics, just looking at basically what the environment is for recruiting people and keeping people in these communities. If there's any questions, please let me know. So,
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So having served on the Board of Education, I know that when we do comps to other communities, for the school district, we always refer to what's called our ERG. I think it's
The DERG.
is
Right.
Well, it used to be
Yeah.
ERG. So, and that was supposed to be towns who's had a similar economic profile as our own. How many of these towns would match up to, would you guess, to our ERG as far as?
I know what you're talking about, the ERG. I don't know what the ERG for your town is for Voluntown school system. What we used to determine this for the town of Sterling was the OPM listing of all the towns. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but it shows the population, it shows the form of government, it shows the median income, the median price of housing, how much land you have in the sense of the town. So we matched up as many of those things for the town of Sterling, and Voluntown was one of those, and all of these other towns were also. Now, Brooklyn and Preston were a little higher. However, we had done a survey of Brooklyn and Preston, so we had their data already. So we were able to use that and took into consideration when we looked at the salary survey if some of the positions were too big. When we did the survey for Preston and Brooklyn, they asked us to look at Norwich, and most of those positions were just so different than any small town that they weren't used. But we had Preston's new data and Brooklyn's new data because we had done that classification and compensation study probably in 22 compared to Sterling. We did more in 23 to 24. So we use the OPM information about the towns to find towns that are comparable. And of course, we keep within the geographic area. As you know, in Connecticut, there is the east side economy, there is the middle of the state economy, and then there is the rich side of Fairfield County and all of those. And the numbers are completely different for different positions. So we stayed in the east portion of the state to compare you and looked at towns that had comparable data to yours. Well, we did it for Sterling and Voluntown was in it. So therefore these others were in it.
okay. So in terms of developing the classification plan, again, I can't emphasize the word objective enough. So we look at the positions, we have some categories. Randy mentioned we have a copyrighted job evaluation system, and we use our rating system for that. And we do look at levels of skill, knowledge, responsibility. We'll talk about the 4 specific factors in a moment. And then we come up with grade determination schedule. And that's based on the salary survey and the rating system. So what I want to emphasize here are the 3 major components of our pay studies and classification studies. And that is basically that we can seek external competitiveness, so you're able to attract and retain qualified employees. We look to establish internal equity so that jobs within the organization and within the town of Voluntown are graded and therefore have very similar pay opportunities in terms of a minimum and maximum that goes along with that grade. And the third consideration is affordability. So every organization needs to grapple with funds that they have available to make any adjustments, to do some things differently, perhaps create a new job that might have happened while we're doing the study. And we recognize that when we do confer with town management regarding different steps we can take to do implementation, which I know will be covered in executive session. So in terms of the classification categories, what you'll see here is that we have senior staff jobs, management and supervisor, technical professional, operational, and support staff. Now, certainly I'm aware that within Voluntown, people wear many hats. You have a relatively small group of jobs, but still there are characteristics of positions that are the same in every organization. And these are the basic job categories that are part of our rating system. And what you'll see is that every job has the same 4 compensable factors. Every job has some degree of authority and autonomy, the ability to make things happen, do as one sees fit, make decisions, perhaps have some ability to have, dollar limits, etc. And those also fall into the impact and scope of the job. So impact, one way we look at that is what's the consequence of error? If this job were to, something failed, would there be a vulnerability perhaps for individual injury, for, damage to buildings, financial impact? We have a number of items that we look at with that. And then also the scope of the job. So what's the breadth? So we do look at both the breadth and the depth of positions. Complexity then also falls in with that in terms of maybe around about 5 different levels of subject matter expertise, the role that the organization plays in terms of influence, which also goes back to the authority and autonomy, but influence through having that subject matter expertise, years of education typically required to do that position, years of experience typically required to do that position, and a number of other factors. And working environment is very key. It tends to be most noticeable, or the greatest differentiators are people who work in positions where they're working out in the elements, let's say, people who have to, be on the road. Again, I mentioned my husband was a building official, so okay, he worked for city here in central Connecticut. He would have to go out in inclement weather or whatever. And so we would take that into account and how often that occurs, any lifting, exposure to caustic chemicals, toxins, etc., noise levels. And then so for some people, they have what we call an office environment. And, that's taken into consideration as well. So for every job, no matter what category, those 4 compensable factors are taken into account. And the questionnaire gets at those very specifically. Any questions on that? Okay. So the final report, we're at that point. We have final approved job descriptions, which are the cornerstone to everything. The classification plan, which establishes grades, and you'll see the number of grades that we have, and associated with a range of pay. And that's from a minimum to a maximum, and your plan has steps in it. And then that really reflects how we rated the jobs and what the external market told us about the value of the jobs. And that's where the decision-making that we bring with our very experienced backgrounds, being able to integrate those 2 major portions of information and data and come up with both something that, again, is externally competitive, internally equitable, and then we work with management to help make it affordable in terms of any steps forward. And then we provide that report as we are given today to you as the town and for the policy implementation. Any questions?
Okay, so we gave all that information to your employees and we're giving that information to you. That's how the process goes for all of our class and comp things. We had numerous discussions with town management. They approved the new job description. So not only did the employee approve it, their supervisor, and then the first select woman approved them, because you want to make sure that the job description shows what the organization is doing and make sure we got it right. Once we had that, we looked at all the materials, discussed all that, and then we used that external information, the salary survey from Sterling with the town of Voluntown in it. And then we did our job evaluations, which you just saw the classifications of how we did that. and create a classification plan, which sets grades for each position through the job evaluation process that we use that our copyrighted system to do that. And then we set up a compensation plan, which I will show you here. So this is the Town of Allentown's compensation. You will note that grade one, step one is the minimum wage of $15.69. And then each position is a certain amount of money towards the end. So between step 1 and step 9 is about 25%. The midpoint is what we use the salary survey to do. We found out what is the market average, what are they paying out there for these positions. So this number is the hourly, the weekly, and then the annual salary for 35 hours. So each grade has that, and we go all the way up to grade 15. For grade 15, we listed 40 hours because grade 15 is the first select woman. And since she has the title of being the public work director, as well as the first select woman, she does most of that work on Fridays, gets the guys all prepared for the next week. So that is something that you'll need to decide if you're going to do that. And if not, you have the 35 hours a week numbers for each position. Now, we know in Connecticut on January 1st of 2025, the salary will be going up to $16.35 for the minimum wage. So we have provided that adjustment to the town so that they now know what each step is on January 1st. This is for now, and we have a compensation for January 1st. The advantage of this system, it's on an Excel sheet, is once you decide if you want to adjust anything, you can make an adjustment in the system and it changes all of them. They're tied right into each other. So you never have to recalculate each grade. You just decide what you're going to go with and it calculates that for you. Most of our finance directors love that piece of the project. So then we reviewed all of this with management for their approval. There were 3 positions that were not classified in this system. And the reason is because their market salaries are for positions that are very hard to fill. And so they didn't fit into the classification system. And we've been doing this a lot in the towns lately because of the economy. And so these 3 positions were determined what their salary would be based on the market only. Because if you don't keep up with the market, you will not be able to fill these positions. So those positions were the assessor, the building official, and the wetlands person. And they have very special certifications. They're very hard to find. As Georgianne said, her husband was a building official. He still gets the announcements about what the salaries are, and they just keep going up because no one's going into the business. And so therefore their salaries are going up. So we did have those 3 positions for that. And then the other issue that needs to be addressed when you're doing your implementation is exempt positions, which are those that do not receive overtime. And the new law on January 1st, 2025, is that a position that has to be exempt, they must be making $58,656 a year. If not, then they would be non-exempt and get overtime. And you have a couple of positions that will make that salary, and so they will be exempt. Any of them that are not that high because this is a federal law that you have to follow, and Department of Labor will come looking for you if you don't do it right. So the other positions will be non-exempt, which means they will receive overtime if they work over 40 hours. So most of the full-time people in your town are working 35 hours. So they would get paid if they work 37 that week, they would get their regular hourly pay for 37. But if they went over 40 hours, then they get overtime, which is of course time and a half. So those are some rules you need to know about. We try to keep you informed about that. You have a few positions that are stipend positions or set shift pay, like your fire guys have a set pay for the shift because they do an 8-hour shift or a 7-hour shift, whatever it is. And then you have other positions that are part-time. They need to keep track of their hours. Most of them know when they come into the position how many hours they're going to be doing per week, but they need to keep track of that. They would be non-exempt. So let's say they're assigned to do 10 hours and their supervisor says, I need you to stay another 3 hours. Then they would get 13 hours for that week rather than the 10, but they wouldn't get overtime until they went up past 40. Which most likely on a part-time person will never happen. So those are some of the things you need to think about when you're doing the implementation. We went over the implementation ideas of how to phase some of this in, how to look at where you put people, because remember, we did not look at individuals and we did not look at their performance. We are looking at the position. So if the position is grade 1, they should be making $15.69 an hour up to $19.64 an hour. Where you put them on that step scale will be your implementation process. So we discussed phasing in. I think there was only 1 or 2 people that weren't at minimum, so you have to get them to minimum. We've been in other towns where there were a whole bunch of people that weren't at minimum. So I was glad to see that most of your people were at minimum. But then you've got a number of your employees have been there 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You need to figure out where to put them, and you have to be fair and equitable to everyone. So if you decide that if someone has 5 years, they're going to be at step 3, no matter, where they are now, even if they were at just the minimum, then put everybody with 5 years at step 3. So we talked through all of this with management and discussed different ways of doing it. And how to move forward with all of that. Again, if you implement this now, this is the scale, but on January 1st, everyone's going to get a tiny boost up from whatever 1635 versus 1569 is, whatever that percent is. So because you have to have your minimum wage be appropriate for Connecticut. People will get that adjustment there. And then you also want to think about, okay, we have a new budget coming in. As I said, I was a budget analyst and manager. So I always think about the budget. So on July 1st, you're going to have a new budget. So as you're doing your preparation for your budget, you need to figure out where are people going to be moving to. Now, with a step system, people will move up a step if they're doing a good job. If someone is not doing a good job, you guys don't have a performance system. We can help you with that if you decide to do it, but it's very hard with a small community to do that. But they would move up to the next step as long as they're doing a good job. If they're not doing a good job, they should receive a PIP, performance improvement plan, to say, we're not moving you up because you're not getting the right work done, and this is what you need to improve on. And once you do, then we'll move you up your step. And if they don't, then you think about other options, other jobs, or separation. Now, if a person has been here a long time and they get up to step 9, everyone will say, well, I'm not getting any more money. Well, that's true. Once you've gotten to step 9, you've learned the job, you've been there. That's what the pay is for that position. The only way that will change is as you move forward, you'll want to adjust this compensation plan based on what the economy's doing, what your budget's doing, what other towns are doing. So you would make those adjustments in an appropriate time. But if a person's at step 9, they don't get to go to the next grade just because they said, I can't go anywhere. They know their job. If there's a promotion, they can get that. If their job has changed, and they're doing, instead of 2 hats, they're wearing 3 hats, then you would want to start the process over of what Georgianne and I talked about, getting their job description, figuring out where they should be in the process. So that's how that works.
I'd like to add one thing just to reinforce. So when Randy was speaking about the midpoint being what I call the going rate of pay in the marketplace, that's roughly the average out there. There's no one specific number that is, all inclusive. However, it's a very good gauge of what's happening in the market. If you're at step 9, you are already paid well above the going rate of pay of the midpoint. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that everyone expects to get or wants to get more pay. That's just a natural thing. However, if you're already being paid that much more than the average person out there, that's very equitable.
So,
One question on the steps.
Pardon me?
yes,
One question on the steps.
okay.
Is the recommendation that you're providing that these steps are annual, or is there going to be, the time is going to increase for the higher steps? I'm thinking of the federal model that this is very similar to. Steps
Right.
1 through 3 are annual, steps 4, 5 and 6 are every 2 years, and then 7 through 10 is every 3 years.
Once you can do that if you wanted to. Once you have established where people should be put based on their years of service, and you have a number of people that really know their job very well because they've been doing it a lot of years. So once you've established that, then you could put together something like that. But if you look at any union contract, they usually have steps, no matter what number it is, 1 or 2 or 8, it's every year until they get to the top. But if you decide to do something like you suggested, it has to be fair and equitable to everyone. You can't say, well, Susie gets her step today and Mary doesn't get hers until another year goes by. You have to be fair and equitable so that everybody is treated the same based on their years of service, as long as they are doing a good job. If they're not, then you would want to work on improving their performance. Does that answer that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And I know that you're going to go into executive session to talk about each of the positions and where we put them. We're available by phone if you need to talk to us this evening. Well, I'll be available by phone. If you have more questions and you want to have an executive session for us to talk to you, we'll be glad to do that. We are already working with the town management in answering their questions. I'm not sure if you know that they've asked us also to assist them with their employee manual, and we went over that this afternoon. We're going to do some more editing, and that will be presented also. So we're here I have received questions from people, a year or two after we've done their project. Not a problem. We're glad to assist and explain things.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Congratulations on getting to this point.
Thank you.
You have Randy's phone number in case.
Thank you. Yeah, we do.
Okay, so we'll leave now, leave you to your work. Thank you
Um,
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
have a great meeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so after we go through the rest of the meeting, we'll have executive session where we're gonna go through the steps and where the positions are, and we'll call, if you guys want to be in on it, we'll call you when we get to your position.
Do you want to move that next because it's every week or do you want to do that?
I make a motion to move executive session to the top of the agenda.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded to move executive session, so right now. Oh, we're gonna add in Julie into executive session. All in
Yes.
favor?
Aye.
And adding in people when we're,
We'll come together.
Yeah.
Yes,
all right. Thank you. All right,
just leave the chairs, it's fine.
all in favor, aye. You all say aye, right?
Aye, yes.